San Diego, Selena Kyle, Robin Hood. Thieves are aplenty in fiction, but what do we do whenever they get organized? What if, in your local fantasy TTRPG game, you have a skill-adept, stealthy rookie in the party of young adventurers? Perhaps they want to know if this is a job or a career. I have good news for you. By the end of this video, you'll have a whole new understanding on what it takes to have a successful Guild of Thieves, to have it be an impactful and important part of whatever TTRPG you're setting to look it into. You'll have a guild so good, even the cleric will join. We're gonna be taking a much more business-like approach to this to see if we can critique a guild structure and improve that. You might be asking what makes me so qualified. I'm just an animated bird on the internet. Well, this magpie, if you don't know, spends a lot of time not playing TTRPGs, being beak deep in the human resources profession. Yes, onboarding, ethics, payroll, succession planning, and everything else the business needs that falls in my wheelhouse. Don't worry though, as there's nothing more at the very core of this wretched hive of scum and villainy than an understanding of efficient business structure and even clear lines of ethics. I am uniquely skilled to be able to talk about each one of these. That's what made me really want to take a look at mixing my two worlds just a bit. How would an HR generalist structure and build a Thieves Guild? It would be a strange instance of a paragon of confidentiality and moral integrity built into a structure for cutthroats and thieves. Full disclosure that Magpie is not responsible for crappy HR. I got into the HR profession because of morally questionable HR, so I don't blame you if you don't trust human resources, but humor me as not being one of the bad ones. I do my part to keep the company and the employee safe and ethically sound, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't rush home wanting to escape the stress levels, so let's cross-contaminate the professional work environment into the escapist safe space. By the end of this video, we'll bring you a new understanding of organization. First, let's look at the magic or fantasy of a group of skilled thieves. We're talking about an organization of crime. If you look at history or even modern day stuff, in most countries, you totally won't see organized crime being handled by those in power in a semi-regular fashion. But how do we structure it in an interesting and fun way? One that comes to mind for me personally is a Skyrim's Thieves Guild, where the only good thing that comes out of it is the nightingale armor you get towards the end of the main story. Magpie fun fact: a married magwife in a suit of nightingale armor. However, unfortunately, most of the rest of the Ragged Flagon is a bit of a disappointing mess. In the corporate world, just as we say in leadership training, if you don't like something, make it your anti-muse. Watch them, study them, do the opposite. So what can we do? What can we see as the fatal flaws of the Thieves Guild of Skyrim? First and foremost, it's far too easy to get in. Even if you fail the recruitment assignment, you're still welcomed in. Then the revolving door of certain businesses tends to give them bad reputations, and the Ragged Flagon has one of those. So actually having no bar of entry sets up a business for quite the troublesome lifespan. Additionally, half if not more of the missions you can sort of screw up and still be paid and be invited for the next more important missions, and since there's no accountability for poor performance, it's another recurring problem you really hear about in the human resources department. We want to be sure that failure isn't something well tolerated, not to say that there needs to be heartless cutthroats the second someone botches a job, but powerful weapons like suspensions, fines, probationary periods, and other disciplinary actions can be taken when appropriate and offer good narrative elements within a story or session. Though, full disclosure, it should be noted that yeah, death certainly wouldn't be out of the question, depending on the failure or progression of failures. You can't just outright kill every up-and-coming thief, but the option's always on the table. If there's some room for growth, then there would need to be mentorship, which Skyrim really makes just a menu option and a gold expense, so technically there's skill growth. I wouldn't go so far as to call them leaders, just skilled tutors. That's another area where you'd want to focus in on and grow what makes the senior members of the guild exceptional. What can your players learn and grow from them? So what else is wrong with the flagon? There's no actual career development up until the moment you've been handed the keys to the kingdom. Merely a quest line, a grind through a bunch of radiant quests, and boom, you're in charge now, but with no actual power available to you. This brings to light another common human resources problem that comes up, and that's the mishandling of promotion or leadership within organizations. And when that's mishandled, it clearly causes trouble in solidifying confidence in the company or organization. Now, any of these troubles skills, any of these problems can certainly be identified as good narrative elements. What if your up-and-coming rogue interacts with and runs into someone who was just recently appointed a position in power, and frankly, it's nepotism, or they're just outright incompetent, or falsified their way through their successes? All of these things, every one of these weaknesses, is something that could be considered as a viable and important story element. In addition to all of that, leadership should matter. There should be great power with great responsibility, even if the thieves are sometimes quite irresponsible. Next, let's talk on a few points of the Thieves Guild in a general sense before we transition into a much more idealistic example of what good thieving looks like. Crime festers in warm, damp conditions. Crime likes opportunity, and crime really likes when there's too much other things going on for anyone to want to bother to stamp them out. All of this to say, there's numerous different distractions for our Thieves Guild of Riften. When you're designing a guild of some sort, preferably a conversation of the thieving sort, keep in mind that the criminal underbelly, just like mold and cockroaches, just thrives where it's hard or inconvenient to get to. They'd love it when they're not the main problem, as I previously stated. In Riften, you have the Civil War, the dragons, the vampires, and countless other problems. Skyrim has a lot of problems. Ensure that wherever your thieves are, wherever it's most considered their home base, that there should be other problems than just them. Or, if it is just them, they might be trying to relocate. Again, every problem, every structural issue, even if a bad one in nature, opens yourself up for this opportunity of storytelling. If you want to learn more about Skyrim's Thieves Guild, there are about 100 video essays and challenges out there that walk you through the miserable experience of working for their guild. Hours and hours of content to learn more lessons just about how bad it is. Easy enough? Alrighty. Next, let's take a look at a good example of a crime syndicate, and where else to look than Drew Hayes' Villains Code series. Yes, this is modern superhero setting, but in general, I think it has a lot of the core principles I'd like to see implemented in a business of criminals. Now, something to touch on in the front of this discussion, I'd have to decide upon the sort of jobs that your guild would do. Both the Guild of Villainous Reformation from Villains Code, as well as the Thieves Guild in Riften, are diverse in the types of employment and skills usable by the respective guilds. There's always numerous types of jobs available. There's different types of theft, those being heists, burglary, pickpocketing, robbery, and each one of those varies in their own way, but we'll break down each one and consider the following works in addition: intimidation, information brokering, smuggling, illegal materials, and contraband of any kind. All of these can inform characters, missions, world building. Perhaps you want a large guild, perhaps you don't want a large one, but different sporadic specialized ones in theft and another specialized in espionage and information. Certainly, all of these things are things you can consider. However, let's focus on our downright criminal examples. Let me go over the basics for those who haven't read this exceptional piece of media. In this world, heroes get very organized, with abilities and coordination to dispatch and handle tasks. Villains Code raises the question, what if the villains did the same? We see it time and time again in traditional hero media: the Sinister Six, the Legion of Doom, the Masters of Evil, villains coming together to do what the heroes naturally do. As we've mentioned before in both Thesis of a Lich and Dragon respectively, the acknowledgement that megalomaniacal supercriminals don't always work well together. But what about this guild of criminals? The guild has numerous powerful supercriminals come together and organize resources and missions for the guild's criminals in order to keep a bit of peace between the heroes and villains, but without sacrifice to their own success and accomplishments. They, much like any other Thieves Guild, should be concerned with survival and success. I won't go into too much of the exact details of it, but if this even remotely sounds interesting, I highly recommend Drew Hayes' book series. I'll credit where it's due. Drew Hayes is my favorite author, so I won't shy away from giving him compliments, but he's written some of, if not the best hero media I've had the pleasure of reading in the past 10 years or so. Villains Code actually just had its audiobook for its third book released semi-recently, and Superpowers is a series about young heroes going through the hero certification program, and it's an exceptional read. But I reckon it's time we revisit the criminal elements. Known as the Guild of Villainous Reformation, these supercriminals organize all kinds of jobs, but as the series implies, they operate under a villain's code. It's the rules they live by, in general, to keep the peace between the heroes and villains, to keep it from being all-out war. There is certainly still moral conflict where the two would butt heads, but the code keeps from all that war breaking out. For the most part, that'll be our first couple of lessons. Rather strewn together, there are clear, meaningful rules in the villain's code. If you break a guild rule, you aren't disciplined through traditional means. They more so send an attack dog to paint the walls with your guts, because when criminals are setting lines and restraints to not be crossed, it's probably best that they be minded and respected. This criminal organization doesn't have a problem with setting a list of expectations and rules to enforce accountability. It's something else to note that this whole dynamic is set up so that heroes and villains aren't at each other's necks. That brings up yet another element of a guild of thieves. You would want to have it understood that a guild of thieves, just as a guild of villains, doesn't want the full brunt of organized powers of law and justice coming at them. It's always inefficient and ineffective. They would almost always be at the losing end, as those who work in the shadows and those who tend to work behind the scenes oftentimes can't present the same full-throttle, brutal offensive that an army or militia or a league of justice would, if you will. There are other elements within the Guild of Villainous Reformation that I think are worth acknowledging. A Thieves Guild should almost always exist within a realm in which they have some influence. More often than not, such powers might be social, traditional wealth, magic, or any other type of political foothold. In Riften, there's a clear connection to Maven Blackbriar. In Villain's Code, the heads of the guild are some incredibly powerful and dangerous figures. The Thieves Guild, in order to survive, has to have some form of grounding. As I said, they are a lot like mold or cockroaches. We have to be able to see that it takes foundation for them to thrive. It has to be rooted end to end. If you want it to be lasting, if you want it to be impactful, it can't be something that can just be brushed off, something that can just be uprooted. So overall, what's so favorable about a League of Extraordinary Criminals? Considering all the risk and reward, we see a lot of bad in Riften reflected as the good in the Guild of Reformation. You have competent, efficient leadership, you have clear guidelines and clear accountability, you have the availability to do a myriad of different jobs. There's bodyguard duties, there's heists, information brokering, numerous things that can be done. Whatever the comfort level of the guild member is determines what kind of jobs they're doing. There's a great deal to be thought over. One has to consider perhaps the storytellers and players alike. What if we don't want a fully fledged and developed successful guild? Both Riften's, albeit terrible and shambled together guild, and the Guild of Villainous Reformation and its power and opulence are both right options. They don't show us right and wrong, they show us the wide expanse of options. No one says we have to commit to one or the other. There's availability here that we can see and do different things in order to tell different stories. If you want your guild to be a bit more underbaked and underdone, and you want your players to come in, impact it, grow it, and make it substantially more powerful, great. That's why we build a guild anyone would want to join, either part-timer, honorary member, or aiming for guildmaster, from your rogues by default all the way to your paladins or clerics. This option of building something and forming it is available to everyone. You can look at Riften if you think you want something your players can truly influence and build to success. If you want a guild of experts who have founded the very core of a kingdom around their ideals, their missions, and their comforts, then look more at the Guild of Villainous Reformation. It allows you to see both ends of the spectrum here, but we've talked a lot on both examples of the guilds. I'll paint you a general image of what I imagine to be an interesting enough premises. You all in the comments can debate and leave me your reactions on what you like, what you don't. Normal magpie policy per the usual, though. If there's anything you like, you can take it. I just ask you leave me a thumbs up or a comment and subscribe as tribute to this magpie's collection of thoughts. As far as the recruitment process, I can't say that Riften's doing an exceptional job. We can't just pick up any street urchin out of the back alley with quiet steps and swift hands. No, we'd have to believe in allowing only the most skilled to join our ranks. There needs to be a bit of exclusivity to successful guild of talent for arrangements to be their very best. Can a proper teacher and leader grow anyone into being that kind of success? Very possibly. However, something like a Thieves Guild in its nature should be more concerned with current and immediate success. So, what if the only way you can really get into our Thieves Guild is by stealing from a member of an associated family or member of the guild directly? This is, funnily enough, something that is inspired by Forging Hephaestus, which is the first book in the Villain's Code series, as the main character does end up stealing or attempting to steal something from an influential head of the guild. Overall, Thieves Guilds are not their most successful with an overabundance of members in their ranks. The inexperienced bring harm to reputation, and that matters in business. Knowing that excellence can be guaranteed to the customer who seeks the services of the guild is incredibly important. When it comes to recruiting, you often hear it's one of the most expensive periods an employee's life with the company. It's a period of onboarding, orientation, and training. The company may sink lots of time, effort, and expenses, and get nothing in return. Or it may take a good bit of time before it's ever returned to the company. Now, I'm not trying to make you guys feel bad for companies at any point, but if we as storytellers, game masters, are looking to take on the challenge of making immersive guilds and businesses, this should be something we need to be putting perspective into. By doing a better job in the recruiting and onboarding process, we ensure we are only having the best of employees of guild members recruited. That sets us up the most success possible. All of that being said, though, in TTRPG settings, we won't often have drug screens, background checks, and other expenditures like modern companies would. There is a resource that both fantasy settings with magics, gods, and monsters, as well as our modern life with taxes, gravity, and pigeons share, and that's time. To any upstanding citizen or scoundrel of the criminal underworld, time is the one resource that you can't steal your way to get more of, chronomancy withstanding. All that being said, it's within reason that more experienced thieves would have to spend their time training new up-and-coming members, so the guild would need to be exclusive on their training, not merely offering it to any street urchin that Brynjolf can catch the eye of in Riften. If we're training anyone, then you might have a high-risk, middling reward. But if you're only training the prodigies who have already shown some expertise, then maybe the thief might have an ideal place in training the next generation. There's another element of business and guildship we need to talk about, and that's the guild. Trainees must understand that they represent the guild. There is pride in the work they do, and it is something that they would need to be implemented into the culture and the people relations of the guild. Obviously, employee engagement is another one of the core principles, and employee culture go hand in hand in human resources. This one's hard in the real world, but since TTRPGs, we get to kind of set the scene and play God a little bit. You can determine what you want the general lifespan and vibe of company culture in a guild to be. Do you want things tense? Do you want things easygoing? Do you want things to be well-founded and reliable, toxic and volatile? All of these are options. Ideally, in a rules-tight guild environment, there would be a sense of pride, integrity, and your stereotypical family environment that a lot of corporate leadership tries to say is there. Can and probably only ever will exist in fiction. Even as someone who has spent a good number of years transforming their night shift culture, it still isn't all happiness. Good days where everyone's getting along and happy, and some crummy days where people are let go, arguments are had, and so on and so forth. Culture is a fickle thing and a complex topic. The ragged flagons, the type of company culture that's going through layoffs and downsizing and probably buys the remaining employees a single slice of pizza as recompense, to boost morale. You can set either end of the spectrum, anywhere to set the stage for the story you want to tell. I think going into the guild is only the first leg, but why join a guild in the first place? Let's look at some perks. So before we move through the responsibilities, the rules, and the repercussions, I think it's worth seeing some of the good that can come from being part of a Thieves Guild. Perhaps you're an honorable thief. Critical area of guild reputation sometimes allows common folk of the kingdom to understand that a guild of thieves can sometimes do better for them than their own kingdom's leadership. Think of the charity of one Robin Hood. But that's something that the guild and Villain's Code get caught up in doing, and they're not shy about it. Sometimes your guild of super criminal minds is at the scene saving the world from something the heroes were too slow to, or too incompetent to stop. You might have the common man see the skills of the criminals and in our instance, the skills of the thieves is not that bad. Whether it be charity work or bolstering the reputation, there's the opportunity to do good. Even a guild of thieves, there are a lot of wiggle rooms for some of these other perks. Perhaps a guild leader is a brilliant inventor, allowing unsanctioned trick weapons closer to Bloodborne type stuff to be available as the guild allows a unique trait or bonus. Your guild, of course, could have potions, spells, or anything else be available to and bought from your guild through another master or mentor. There are a lot of resources that can be used or considered when supplementing the creation of your guild. What makes them unique? What's their main thing? Again, think of previous conversations about the main thing. Think about what's so special in the secret sauce that could come from your guild. Perhaps relocation's another possible perk. If you're in the HR business and you have a company that exists either around the country or around the world, you'll probably hear a lot of questions about, do we have a factory in insert coast city or insert beach bay? Any of those things. More often than not, no, because touristy places are not really going to be where manufacturing can be done in the cheapest sense. However, the Thieves Guild's not quite the same. Perhaps it's a possible perk if your guild has a wide influence across several kingdoms, countries, and perhaps the reach of your entire fantasy world. As mentioned in previous videos, keep in mind scope and power. For there to be a global influence, there has to be a lot more structure. In the event you might need to flee a bad situation or an execution, or just want to live closer to the beach, maybe it's something that your guild can help you with. We will likely not touch on too much of something like tuition reimbursement, but consider this a kind of comparable benefit. What other perks might there be? Sanctioned fences that there must be for any good Thieves Guild pawn shops willing to take and relocate to other areas where the stolen goods might not be identifiable as stolen or lost. Perhaps this is even a route for a higher position in the guild if your character might want it. Retirement plans, if you will. What good would a guild be if you couldn't have a get-out-of-jail-free card? Likely not truly free, probably reasonably expensive, but this touches on something that's worth noting. For a guild to be respected, to really have its teeth in a kingdom, they have to have a formal acknowledgement or sway. Something I touched on with Villain's Code, but be sure there is some kind of grounding, whatever kingdom they're in. Perhaps a high-ranking government official is a member of the guild. Perhaps there's some element of blackmail in the royal family. What happens when someone in the guild gets caught? This is really where you want to double down on. Okay, outside of just sneaking in the dead of night and breaking people out, how else does this person escape? I think dental's a good perk. Underappreciated for sure. Perhaps you effortlessly swap this one aside because your level of science and magic in your campaign setting, but I have found it comedic to include one of the tried and true benefits with each one of these organizations. Currently, I'm thinking adventuring gets a life insurance policy, assassins get some retirement contribution match. I don't actually have a good idea for a fighters guild option, so if you've got any of those, leave me a comment. I'm always open to further videos or further thoughts on already listed video ideas, of course. In a guild, not all work is direct theft. Perhaps you're the anti-theft security system. Of course, this comes with the weighted bit of responsibility between the concept of knowing what you're allowed to and not allowed to do, allowed to set up, and not putting your other guild members in too much direct harm's way. But perhaps a local business wants to test its fancy new magical system it puts so very much money into. Is it able to withstand expertly trained guild thieves? So you're paid a handsome lot to try and break in. This can be done above board. You'd likely have some legal protections from the kingdom. Now, the last one's a double-edged sword. Access to information brokering and referral of where to sell the information, for when you have information to broker anywhere in the campaign. Even if only one player is a thief, the important access to a network of information is sometimes indispensable. The big bad evil guy, some ancient wizard who's been moving from behind the scenes for years and centuries, or even millennia. Well, I gamble and say someone knows something about him. Perhaps you're fighting some sort of ancient monster that has awoken for the first time, and all that can be found about them is through a collection of tomes that have been handed back and forth from collection to collection. Maybe your information broker knows exactly where to get a counterfeit copy. You don't need the authentic thing, you just need it to say the right things. This is one I think is underappreciated because everyone just wants to go to a library and stumble upon the right hits. Put the access to the things in front of your players, and sometimes help them do it. Players aren't always gonna see the routes of problem solving that you'll lay forward, but I think it's something that can be worked through and helped along. So, responsibilities. And this one's a big one. I think I really like paladins, right? And that's almost the opposite of what we're talking about, but ride with me here. What are paladins known for? What is their bread and butter? They are foundational holy warriors who live by an oath of ideals. A lot of times, thieves are the same, at least in this guild, our guild. I've come up with this as a general mantra for all the thieves to live up to. Lie to the priests, cheat the laws, steal from the kingdom, but always keep honor among thieves. There should be no moral corruption about lying to churches. Even if you have a holy thief, they probably worship a god that understands lying to other holy figures of other deities. It's just part of the practice. Cheating the law and stealing from the kingdom go hand in hand. You're looking to be number one and help the guild sustain being number one. You're not concerned with the wealth and legality of the kingdom, you're concerned with the success of the guild. That's your family. That's where success, escape, and comfort are found. But always keep honor among thieves. As in this world, as in most fantasy settings, we have to be able to trust one another. We have to be able to rely on one another. If you're breaking all the rules and committing all the crimes with someone beside you or at your back, you need to know that they have your best interest at heart. You need to know that they'll be able to watch out for you and take care of you, so that relationship needs to be honorable. So let's look at some general policies I think should be considered whenever building a Thieves Guild. All stones left unturned. If a mission has failed and members survive and return to the guild, they must fill out a previous obstacles and traps form in order to inform the guild of likely dangers if marked. The mission was not deemed successful, so you have to set the next person up for success. This may be hard, little sting to the pride to make the next guy's job a little easier, but the guild's interested in ultimate success, not whose ego gets fed. When you work for the guild, you are not permitted to do work for any other thief guild unless you are held responsible to severe disciplinary action up into and including execution. Professional rivalry? Should you make this work a competition, should you strive to feed ego and achievement over the betterment of the guild, ensure that no actions cross any other policy or cause others to question the integrity of the guild, lest you be subject to disciplinary action up into and including execution. There should be a note on some general sensibilities of training, proper equipment, and the right of evacuation. Safety rules are something to consider and probably go more in depth at a later point, but if you'd want me to ensure that guild members go through proper refreshed equipment, you don't want anyone so foolish as to realize they made it into the field on a mission and have no lockpicks or have cheap lockpicks that break. You'd want them to understand when to dip out. At what point does the mission become lost? Perhaps you realize a mission is a sting operation by the kingdom, by some rival or enemy of the whole guild. Yes, you should evacuate as to not be caught or be tortured and let loose information of the guild. Lastly, the first aid training is something that perhaps this magpie is particularly fascinated and fixated with, but I think a guild where you might be dealing with traps and minor skirmishes and fights with the night watch guards and any of those kinds of things, understanding how to treat yourself and fellow guildmates is certainly something that a guild would properly train you on. In ideal circumstances, as aforementioned, we'd like to recruit holy healers, but until then, we have to be able to watch out for our own. Something every business of moderate repute might have something called an open door policy. Typically in the world of HR, that means if you've got something going on in your personal life and you need to talk to someone about it, vent about it, you're able to come to leadership and talk it out without fear of judgment or anything like that. You can just talk to get it out of the system. For a Thieves Guild, though, I found it a lot more interesting that if a guild door is open, you are welcome inside. However, within the guild hall, if a door is locked, stay out, as they know it's a guild of thieves, but stealing from our own isn't absolutely forbidden. One of the last policies that I think is fairly under consideration is to not steal from the poor. I think that's a fair consideration. The Guild of Thieves doesn't gain anything from scratching the bottom of the barrel, as frankly a lot of thieves are already at the bottom of the barrels, so there needs to be some level of empathy and understanding. When we were talking about separation from the guild, this more than likely happens in one of a few small ways. Initially, there's the element of retirement aging out of usefulness to the guild, and buying your way into a comfortable, opulent existence. The other way is one that more clearly reminds you that you're still in a world of criminals. Should you be able to be deemed a threat to the guild, break too many rules, or morally cross the line set in stone, you are very likely to be executed. The separation assessment wouldn't be done lightly, even if there are instances where death isn't involved. I imagine removal of tongues and hands to keep too many secrets from being spilled would certainly be considered. Though understand that if you are left alive and sent on your own way, you would probably be done. So with some magical ailment or removal of ways of communicating, there's really only one peaceful way of leaving the guild, and that's once again for those who've retired out of it. That's really done when you're so old and perhaps it's time to cash out that 401k and get on out of here. But if you're much earlier, I'd say the only way of avoiding execution while separating from the guild is you best be powerful enough to not want to have the guild to have to deal with you. Let's talk a bit about the differences between the types of theft, because this is one I think a lot of people might find confusing. So your pickpocketing, which is swift hands leading to empty pockets, one-on-one, Assassin's Creed kind of bump shoulders, swap someone's pocket watch, easy enough, right? Burglary is breaking and entering to get something or whatever catches your eye. You find the unlocked windows, sneak into the house in the dead of night, take their wand of fireballs. Heists are much more elaborate, planned operations that are likely to involve way more valuable and serious items. They are intentful and directed, typically a lot more risky. Robbery is done with violence or the threat of violence. A lot of these other ones, you're probably looking for the least amount of obstacles as possible, but robbery, you're probably looking to possibly hurt someone. I think something else to consider is, generally speaking, when it comes to Thieves Guilds, depending on the magic in your setting, I certainly can't deny the fact that you probably need to consider magic. How much magic is in your world? How would one determine how much magic your thieves have access to? Maybe there's a magical mentor, maybe there's some sort of expert there that could deal with these magical threats. The thought of a Thieves Guild in relationship to business needs and needs to be structured needs to have clear guidelines, policies, and the availability to trustworthy to be mutually successful while being independently successful and selfish. I think it's key for you to really dig in and realize that a Thieves Guild is really no different than any other major business, self-interested, self-motivated. They're just doing it through, I guess, direct theft. So maybe you can appreciate the commitment to one's own identity as opposed to the obfuscation of doing so under the guise of some improvement or what have you. I think all of these elements could easily be bound up into something more polished and unique. There are a few suggestions I was given on Blue Sky as to general aesthetics you could go for. The one I was most drawn to for certain reasons was an organization of corvids. So crows would be known as the upper echelon, the leaders. Those, your heads of the guild, the ones that sit around the table to determine policy and mission and direction. Then of course you'd have the most elite regular soldiers, your magpies, if you will, known for only finding and collecting the best of things. Magpies would be your rank and file, your experts, and of course, below them, the shiny new recruits. You'd have your Jays, but that's really not all. I had people suggest different forms of spirits and ghosts, the excellent recommendation to use teas to symbolize different strengths and brews, and even scavengers, natural creatures that will consume and take leftovers. All of these are excellent aesthetics. You can go and use any of them to inspire your own guild. So as we wrap up, I generally want to say I greatly appreciate you guys to let me know what you thought. I think there's a lot of potential in continuing to look at these facets under different fantasy concepts under my business guys to help me break down and elaborate on themes and structure to these nebulous concepts. I think that's one of my biggest callings as I'm designing things for maybe my own TTRPG or setting, is that I wanted to be user-friendly. I can't have the critique of Dungeons & Dragons that it's not DM-friendly and then proceed to not lay out the proper rails and tracks in order to be successful. Consider going forward with all of the things I've laid out, potential policies and successes needed of needing competent, trusted leadership, understanding that a Thieves Guild thrives where there is opportunity and social discomfort, that a Thieves Guild requires social power in some form or fashion to sustain and survive. All of these sort of things and much more I want you to take away from this video and really muse over them. Tell me what you think. Do you have a favorite Thieves Guild that perhaps I should look at further for inspiration? Do you have a major adventuring guild that you think might be used for the next part? Let me know. I am only as valuable as I am informed by you guys. It should be noted at this point, I want to go a bit off script and mention that there are other things I am professionally looking at, like getting my OSHA 30 or like a black belt in Six Sigma, just to further diversify my skills and knowledge within business stuff. And if in that process you want to hear me ramble about any of those, let me know. I'm more than happy to really gear my creativity where you guys think I should. I want to say we crossed 500, and that's pretty awesome. Now we just gotta chase that 1,000, right? And then further and further beyond. So I just want to say, as I say time and time again, from the bottom of my feather-riddled heart, thanks and thanks again for watching. Go forth, my wonderful thieves, and magpie responsibly.